Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Meta Cafe. Grab your cup of coffee or your tea, sit back and relax, and let's chat a bit about the astrology, human design, and gene keys energy for today. It's really good to be here with you this morning on what is looking like it's going to be another really stellar day here in the Pacific Northwest. And I'm really glad that it could possibly be a day to go sit outside and really enjoy the sunshine of the fall. All right. So this morning, I want to go back a little bit in time, if we can. I've been on air doing these broadcasts now for over a year. We started last August of 2017. And good morning, Michelle. And when I began doing this, the idea behind it was to bring you the astrology of the day and to draw a card for the day and sort of give you an idea of what the energy was that you could expect. And since then, of course, it's changed. It's sort of now a bigger platform. It is now about teaching you more and more about astrology. And then, of course, my favorite astrology type is human design and has morphed over time into my love of the gene keys. And as I go along, I share all of that with every one of you. And over time, of course, we have experienced, from the very beginnings of what is astrology to what are the parts of astrology to what is, what do planets do, all that kind of thing. But over time, new people have joined us and maybe are joining us and not necessarily knowing all of the backdrop of things that you already know. So I thought today we would take a little bit of time and do some exploration of the roots of astrology, getting back to the basics, let's say. What do the planets mean? What does the houses mean? What are the signs? How do we put together a chart, et cetera, et cetera? And ultimately, when we look at astrology, Tam yesterday in a conversation with me asked a question, I guess that people were asking her, and that where does astrology come from? I mean, who decided what was going to mean what? And I guess it's a kind of fair question, right? Because, where did it start and who did it? Who really did make up the idea of what Jupiter means, what Venus means, etc. And, at the time, she kind of stumped me. I wasn't sure what to say, but I did know that it went back all the way to our ancient roots. So as I was sitting here this morning thinking about what does all this mean and where did it come from, the thing that came up to my mind was these are all archetypes, right? These are the energies of planets. The energies in the houses and the signs are archetypal energies. And archetypes are really it's just a word that tells you about a sort of function that a certain type of personality makes or does or represents. In Jungian psychology, there are all types of archetypes. There's the mother archetype, the father archetype. There's the going back to Carolyn Mace's work, she had the prostitute as a type, an archetype. And there are the caretakers, there's the bold, people there. So an archetype is really just an energy signature that a type of person expresses. In astrology, an archetype might be considered something like a Gemini, right? Gemini, the sign, is the archetype of the communicator. The Leo is an archetype of the king or the queen or the heart-centered, I want, I get kind of energy. An archetype of Libra is about balance and the diplomat, if you will, or the politician. So all of the different things that we work with, whether it's a planet, a sign, or a house in a chart, all starts with this idea of an archetype. So where did the archetypes come from? Well, they came from literally our ancient ancestors who were great observers of human nature, of nature in and of itself, of life on this planet. Today, we are really very unobservant, right? I was thinking about this morning going, wow, I wonder how many times my grandchildren might have been sitting outside at night looking up at the sky and going, what's that star, right? What's that? Why is that over there tonight when it was over there last night? And they don't have that connection. I mean, there's a couple of different reasons. One, the skies aren't as dark as they were in the times of our ancestors. Two, there's a very busy life going on, and they're at school and they have homework and they have their cellular devices and their iPads and their games and all that to play with. So we as human beings have really lost the connection to the observer of the universe, where our ancestors had a lot of time on have a job. If you didn't have a telephone, this is such a tool of distraction. And if you didn't have other things to do, what would you do? And I would say, sorry, I just had to mute my phone. I totally forgot about that. For many of us, we find ourselves with time on our hands to observe. What are the animals doing? What does it look like? We can go outside now and we can observe what's happening around us. And we could actually then make some predictions maybe about what was the winter going to be like. What things are coming for us, because maybe we would have observed long enough that we would be able to equate what we're seeing out there with a pattern that repeats, right? When the woolly worms are out early, then that means we're in for a cold winter kind of thing, farmer's almanac sort of wisdom. We've lost connection with that wisdom, right? Astrology is still connected to that wisdom. It's connected to that wisdom through these archetypal energies. So let's start with the planets, because the planets are the ones that, our ancestors observed. And originally, they were only able to observe the planets up through Saturn, right? Because they knew there was the sun, the moon, and Mercury, Venus, Mars were all very visible. Jupiter is visible. And Saturn is visible. But when you get beyond that, it fades to the background of the stars. So for a good number of years, there was only the first 7 planets, or the first seven planets, if you count the sun and the moon. We didn't have access to Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, Chiron, and all the things that we use now were not available then. And then began a process then of our ancestors attributing human qualities. There's a word for this. It's called anthropomorphizing, where we take something, an inanimate object, and we anthropomorphize it. We give it human qualities. So if we're observing Venus, and we're also observing what's going on around us in the world today, and we see that this planet and its movement seems to form a specific kind of aspect pattern, or an orbit that we can recognize that repeats itself. The moon, of course, the number one thing, and the sun, the number 2, that they could observe every day, right, as moving across the backdrop of the stars in the sky. And of course, that leads them to begin to talk about what it means to have this planet, this beautiful star planet named Venus up in the sky. They begin to attribute to that planet or to that star qualities that they see that are occurring around them at the time, or the qualities in the people that seem to be born at that particular time, let's say. And so it all begins with going back to these archetypal energies, where Venus begins to be a feminine planet. In some cultures, Venus was very masculine. In some cultures, Venus, if we go way, way back, Venus was actually possibly a comet, a cometary body that entered into our solar system. This was observed by the ancient Assyrians, maybe even the Babylonians, as she came into the solar system, probably getting caught up in the gravitational pull of Jupiter and the other planets. and then got caught in the orbit around our sun. And as she cooled from this bright, hot cometary body, she becomes a planet. And isn't it interesting that Venus, out of all of the planets in our solar system, is hotter than even Mercury, that's closer to the sun? As in, she's newer to our universe or to our solar system, and she has not yet cooled enough to be less hot than Mercury, that is even closer to the sun. And in some cultures, then this bright planet becomes the energy of the masculine, as we talked about during, was it last week before, with the Maya? The Maya considered Venus to be a masculine entity, not feminine at all. In fact, Venus often portended war or the fall of a government, and we talked about how all of that happened. And these things didn't just spring up from a vacuum. They come from long observations of things that happen when these particular planets are in particular places. And then they get, stamped on by our anthropomorphizing them, giving them human qualities. And so then as time rolls on, we get to the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans, who had this whole pantheon of gods, and the planets become the gods, right? The gods become the planets. Which came first, the gods or the planets? It doesn't really matter, but the qualities that the planets have are the exact qualities of the Greek and Roman gods. So what does that tell you? Right? There is this consistency in where this comes from. So the planets in an astrology chart are really representative of an archetypal energy, right? The sun, the archetype of life and vitality and the energy of you as a person, their personality. The moon, the reflection of the sun, the more inner qualities, the emotional qualities of you and who you are and how you express yourself emotionally. Mercury, about communication and movement. In, I want to say, Greek and Roman times, he was the messenger god. He was Hermes, the fleet-footed god that would deliver messages who was like the purveyor of knowledge between the gods and mankind, or the gods and the lesser gods. And he would bring the messages of what it was that the gods wanted next. So we always think of Mercury as the messenger that's telling us what comes next. And when he moves into a new sign, as he just did a couple of days ago, moving into Scorpio, he begins to deliver a new message, in this case from the sun, into and down to human beings, bringing it, maybe you could even look at this as delivering information from higher consciousness to our lower consciousness, from our high self to our low self, from our divine self to our planet self, to our physical self. All right. So good morning, everybody that I haven't said good morning to. I am not ignoring you at all. I just got on a roll early. Yeah. Okay. So Colleen says there's a great book called Braiding Sweetgrass that talks about our connection, or lack of, to nature. It's huge. We all did at some point in our history. We lived according to nature. It was all that counted. We didn't have television to tell us what the weather was going to be. We didn't have news that was delivered to us instantaneously about big chaotic things happening in other cultures. So all we really had was each other and nature. And we survived quite nicely, thank you very much, that way for millennia. And then things got complicated, right? Consciousness kind of broke off into these varying sub-archetypes of archetypes, right? So we have so complicated, and I'm going to say this word, I don't know if this is actually a word, complexified our world, that we've lost the connection to everything simple, right? So when we're talking about astrology, and even though it is a discipline that has a lot of complications, it is a complicated study. It's really very simple when you boil it down to its component parts. The planets are archetypes. They are archetypes. They are the types of people that they were observing on the planet back, way, way back, right? And then they were kind of given or assigned godlike characteristics, right? There was something magical in Jupiter, the sky god. Jupiter was Zeus, and Jupiter was God with a capital G, right? He was the big sky god. Gaia, Earth was was being fertilized by Zeus, the sky god, by Jupiter, the sky god. So Jupiter ends up really representing growth and the idea of expansion, and the idea of fertility. A fertile earth comes from Jupiter, the sky god. And so in astrology, we take those same energies and we give them these personalities. So Venus is this goddess that she has this fire and she's beautiful. When we think of looking at beautiful Venus in the night sky, doesn't she give you goosebumps sometimes? How bright she shines and how magical it is that she flips from being the evening star to the morning star. And if you were not educated in the ways of astronomy, you were just an observer of this, you would absolutely think that she was wonderful. And when she does this weird flip, you've observed that things change in your world. And that's really all astrology is. It is the prediction of things that might possibly be happening on Earth based on a principle of as above, so below. And that also comes to us through the Greek philosophers, right? The philosophers of old who took that ancient information, that ancient knowledge, and brought it to the people sitting on the steps of the Parthenon or the temples and explaining these things to people. But they couldn't just explain it in regular words. They made them stories. These are the stories of our lives. So astrology brings us these archetypal energies in the bodies of these planets. And every time we discover a new body, a new heavenly body, like Chiron, like just recently, I can't even say it, it's Umau. There was Ceres, there was all of the, what do we call them now, dwarf planets. So Pallas Athena and Ceres and Juno, and those are all ascribed energies. It's almost unconscious when we name these planets. It's almost like there's this energy field of potential that we're experiencing. That's this energy that's being expressed on the planet. And these new bodies get named almost unconsciously by astronomers in a way that tells us what it is going to represent in the archetypal energy present on the planet. So I would imagine then when Chiron was discovered and it was given that name, I think there were other names actually that Chiron was going to be given. But it turned out to be something, based on what was going on in that time period. And then all we do as astrologers is we begin to translate that information into a story about what it represents to us as individuals. And we get that story by observation, observing what's been happening in the world around us, right? And we've got a lot of years now to be able to see. When I look at what it is that is going on with Uranus, I'm not just looking at what's going on with Uranus today. I'm going back 84 years to the last time Uranus was here in this sign. And then I can go back 84 years beyond that and tell you what was going on with Uranus at that time and how all of these things build one upon the other and bring us the energy of the time we live in. So we know from long observation that Uranus in Taurus affects money or how we trade with one another, right? If we look back enough 84-year time periods back, we were trading, goods and services. We weren't trading money necessarily. Money was a different kind of idea. And over time, every time Uranus moves into Taurus, there's something that moves through the our money, our world, our financial world, or how we trade with one another, how we value our services. What we value changes as well, right? So the planets bring us an archetype, and then we observe how that archetype performs in a certain sign. And I want you to think of the signs now as sort of the clothing that the planet is wearing, right? So if we take the planet Mercury and we put a certain type of sign on it, let's put Gemini on it because that Gemini coat is very familiar. It's a color that looks awesome on Mercury, right? There's a real affinity between Mercury and this color blue, let's say. And so we say that when Mercury is in Gemini, it's actually the ruler of Gemini because there is such a close affinity to what Mercury's purpose is and what Mercury does and what Gemini does. If we take Venus and we put it with its Libra clothing, then we can see how there's an affinity between that. And now let's take a planet like Uranus and let's put it, which is a planet that Uranus represents doing things that are unexpected, right? Wasn't it Uranus that castrated his father? I'm sure Saturn didn't see that coming, right? So Uranus does things unexpected and has rippling effects on our day-to-day life, our social structures, our inventions, and how we view the world changes whenever Uranus is changing signs. So if you put Uranus in Taurus clothing, it would be like you putting on the worst color ever for you, right? Because it's discordant, right? Like if I put yellow on, I would look like a big banana, right? We know that, right? So that would be like me, being Mercury and putting on the clothing of Scorpio. Not happy here, right? Not exactly happy here. Not exactly looking my best, not exactly being at my best. So when planets move through different signs, the signs are like the clothing that the planet's wearing. If it's wearing clothing that really matches its, energy, then everything seems to go smoothly and everything that comes up works hand in hand to take us someplace. And when it's not, then things get a little discordant and messy and we're challenged by the energies. Please tell me this is all making sense to everybody. Good morning, Debbie. Good to see you. Linda, good morning to you. Colleen, I know I read something you wrote, but I didn't say good morning. Good morning to you. Suzanne, good morning. Susan Bronlyn, good morning. Mimi, good morning. Good to see you ladies out there. So let me know in the chat if you have questions, okay? Because now I'm going to take it one step further. Now we've got to look at the houses. So we have the planets that are the archetypes, the sign it's in, sort of the clothing it's wearing, the way it is going to express itself. And the houses tell us where this is going to take place, what part of our lives this will take place in, right? So the houses, there are 12 of them, and the houses are like the mansions. If we went around every mansion, every house, we would be expressing the energy in a little bit different way. So let's say Mercury in Scorpio is in your first house. That is going to be purely about you personally. Yet if it is in your, let's say it's in your spouse's 10th house, it's going to express in his career, in his worldly self, in the way he expresses himself in the world. If it's in the 6th house, it may show up in your body. It may show up in your workplace, in the inner dynamics or the dynamics of your interpersonal relationships with coworkers or, with your students if you're a teacher. It may show up actually in the way that you serve. How do you give back from yourself? So the houses tell us where something is going to take place. And actually, I tried this morning before we got online here. Facebook in its infinite wisdom, always changing stuff. Used to be I could just upload a document and you guys could have access to it, but no more. Or at least I couldn't figure out how to do that this morning. So I'm going to have to use it as a Dropbox or Google Docs or something like that. So I will upload those to those, mediums, and then you will have access to what do the planets mean? What does it mean? What do the houses mean? And what do the zodiac signs mean? What are the traits? And I know that's going back to a lot of basic information, but it was kind of fun as I was writing those the other day for another project. Because I even was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Oh yeah, I forgot about that too. So it was kind of fun. It was kind of a good exercise for me to go back and to view things from the point of view of a newbie who knows nothing, and to see some things that I might have forgotten about in the grand scheme of things. So now you have this idea that there are these planets, these archetypal energies. They're wearing kind of a costume or a different, outfit today, and they're moving through an area of your chart, i.e. an area of your life. And it might be affecting your finances. It might be affecting your home. It might be affecting your children. There are 12 places to choose from, right? Where a planet can be transiting through. And it drives literally the experiences that you will have. And not because it's magical or anything like that, but because over millions or thousands of years, let's say tens of thousands of years of observation have shown these specific things to be true. And now our lives are a whole lot more complex. Right? When Mercury was first discovered and they were first realizing, oh, it's the messenger planet. It seems to bring new messages, maybe a new a way of speaking to one another. I guarantee you they weren't thinking of cell phones and laptops and computers and social media and websites because they weren't there then. But as we evolve, we look at things that we are, in our outer world, such as a communication device, i.e. a cell phone, and we go, wow, that's a communication device. It really belongs under the auspices of Mercury. And then someone else can take a look and go, well, the internet is really this high-tech sort of evolution of bringing, information in from nowhere. Does that belong with Gemini and Mercury, or does it really belong with Uranus? We don't know. So we're going to say that Uranus rules perhaps the internet, but that Gemini and Mercury rule websites, right? The actual communication with one another through social media, etc. So we complicated things, right? Things get more complex. And so now, what may have been 2 or 3 things that we thought of that belonged under Mercury, Venus, and Mars, perhaps, now have new things attributed to them. So it's gotten bigger. It's gotten more complex. All right. Questions. Yes, it's making sense. And this refresher is good. Thank you very much for that, Mimi. And no other new questions. Okay, good. Wait, what does that say? Colleen says, oh, I'm obsessed with acorns and woolly bear caterpillar colors. I don't even know what made me bring that up, except that was the only thing I can think of in the moment. Like I was watching my cat, and I thought, wow, she is shedding really early this year. This was back in August. And I'm like, why is she shedding? And I thought, there's just this wisdom, this thing that just bubbled up. It's going to be a cold winter. And sure enough, we got cold temperatures not long after, right? Earlier than expected. And then I can look at the wisdom of Saturn in Capricorn and go, oh, it's also probably going to be a drier winter here. Because I know that Capricorn is a dry, cold sign. Saturn rules Capricorn, and that enforces that dry, cold energy. And at least for the state of Washington, that is normally a very wet place, it tends to dry it out. And I know Debbie's sitting there going, yeah, well, that didn't work in Florida. Well, Florida's probably a different sign, right? All of the states in the U.S., the country, in fact, has a birth date, has a ruling planet, right? Washington happens to be a Scorpio, ruling planet Mars and Pluto. Not sure what Florida is, but I could find out, right? All I have to do is go find the birth date, the date that Florida came into being as a state in the US. The United States has a birth date too. We generally speak of it as July 4th, 1776. And those dates then become the birth dates. And then we can take and apply the archetypal energy, the costume that that energy is wearing, and the place in the chart, the house where action took place, to understand what a country's like. What is their national identity? What is the costume that they're wearing? What things are going to happen to them and when? I mean, it becomes very easy then with, knowledge, just a little bit of knowledge, to be able to say, okay, United States is a Cancer country. Cancer is protectionistic. Cancer is about safety and security. Cancer is about nurturing and taking care of. Remember the saying, give us your tired, your poor, your something masses yearning to be free. So Cancer, right? So Cancer. And then in response to big things that threaten us, what do? We put on our hard shell. We put in protections and security. We have laws. We're a nation of laws designed to protect, right? They were meant to be applied equally, but there are other things in our chart of the nation that create inequality in the way that those things are expressed. Interestingly enough, when our country was born, I think it was Pluto was in Aquarius, and Pluto coming up to Aquarius here in 2024, just 4 or 5 years from now. And what are the implications then for our country? This is how we can take a chart, a birth chart, and we can project outward through that life of that country, the life of a person, and predict from that what things may happen. And in that, I know some of you are thinking, okay, well, what about free will, right? Does that mean that I'm fated to always be this way, or to have these things happen to me, or, to have to always do things in this way? But we as individuals, at least we as humans on the planet, have free will. We can choose how to respond. We may not be able to choose what happens to us. Right? I'm sure Debbie would not have chosen to have Hurricane Michael come roaring through her backyard. But we can choose. Our power, our free will lies in how we respond to life as it throws us these challenges, right? Every day we are challenged with things, that every day we have blessings given, and it's all our free will lies in how do we respond to those things? Now, I'm going to build on the next piece of this, unless there's any questions here that people are asking. Colleen says, animals know. I live in the woods, and a few hours before Hurricane Sandy hit, it was eerily quiet. You didn't see any wildlife, not even a sparrow, or hear them. Well, I'm going to share with you a story that Debbie told me, because her dog, Cassie, before the hurricane, I think she said it was 2 or 3 days early, and maybe you can correct it in the message place there, Debbie. A couple of days before the hurricane hit, her dog was sitting by the front door, like, get my leash, let's go, let's get out of here. And she kept, doing that. And then something else, the day that Debbie finally decided to leave, the dog was like, at the door, let's go. And, almost like the dog knew that something's coming. We need to get out of here. So our animals are really sort of those harbingers. And, we've lost connection, right? Luckily, Debbie paid attention. And she got in her car and she left the town before the devastation hit. But the animals know. So you're absolutely right. Gail, good morning to you. Joining late today. I'll go back to catch up. Essentially, Gail, what I've been doing is going back through the basics of astrology, as in, i.e., where did the planets come from and how come they mean what they mean, the signs and what does that mean, and the houses and what does all of that mean. So yes, absolutely, you can pick up where, you can pick up that. Now I'm going to go to what makes things a little more complex, and where it's possible that I lose some of you, where you go, I don't know what the bleep she's talking about. And that is when we look at the relationships between planets. And we call those things the aspects that a planet is making. And these relationships tell us about how are these planetary bodies getting along. And they're words like squares, trines, conjunctions, inconjunctions, sextiles, semi-sextiles. And then I take it one step further sometimes and I talk about aspect patterns like mystic rectangles, like grand trines, like grand squares, or what other ones have we talked about? The finger of God or the yod. So we take these planets now, and they're not just these singular bodies that are, moving through your chart. There are, umpteen of them. I use about 13 or 14 different bodies in your chart. When I pull up your chart, look at this. This is a chart of just today. So look at all those different things. There's far more than 9 things right here, right? There's 3 right there, 4, 5, and then there's another 5 there, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Holy cow, I'm insane, right? No, I'm not insane. Well, my husband might tell you differently, but I am looking at all of the relationships, or at least the key relationships. All of these lines in here give me those relationships. This red line right here tells me that the part of fortune today is being stressed or challenged by the sun, right? And Ceres. And it tells me here that the planet Venus and Mercury that are in a conjunction are in opposition to Uranus. Challenge, right? So I can tell when I look into the chart by looking at, first of all, the colors, the big key. Red tells me trouble, or challenge, or something big going on. The blue lines really tell me where things are easy and flowing. And then, oh man, I gave my daughter that pen. Dang it. Hold on. I want to show you something else. Let's use black. So I looked at the chart this morning and I see a configuration. And I want to be able to tell you what the configuration is. And it happens to be a mystic rectangle that is playing out here. Oops, don't laugh at my drawing, okay? I just missed the line, so it wobbled a bit. So here's a mystic rectangle, right? This line should have been out here a little bit more. And the mystic rectangle gives us this access to mystical, magical, mystery, and miracles in the day, the potential for that today between Neptune and Pluto and Pallas Athena and the part of fortune. I would say expect something good today, something miraculous, something you didn't see coming, right? Even out of the tragedies, maybe we hear about people who have survived. Who knows, right? We don't know. But there's that mystic rectangle right there today. And that tells me something about the day. So we have not only the deeper meaning behind your astrology chart is the relationships between the planets and where they were in your chart when they were born. Then we also have the relationship between the planets and where they were when you were born and how they're playing with the planets now that are transiting past them. Is all that making sense? Tina, good morning. Good to see you. Tina's not been able to join us in the morning because not enough bandwidth or something on their internet, and her husband had this special thing he was doing, and she couldn't get online at the same time he was doing that, so they must have gotten that fixed. So bless you. It's good to see you. We've missed you. I missed you. I'm sure other people did too. So it is the relationship between these planets that really help me pinpoint what some of the events might be in your life, that what some of the challenges are, what some of the really good things are. When we talk about timing, like timing of getting married or timing of starting a new job or things like that, we can look to your astrology chart by looking at the relationships that the planets are making to one another. And that's how we can actually use astrology in our day-to-day lives. So when I use terms like today, let's see what's going on today. The moon is squaring the sun. A square is a 90-degree angle, a 90-degree relationship. So the relationship between the moon today and the sun is a bit scritchy. They don't necessarily get along today, right? The challenge actually today, in the face of the new moon that was just a week or so ago, is that the first crisis, the crisis of action, right? I get the crisis of action because of the astrologers that have come before me, noting that when the moon and the sun are challenged after the new moon, it brings up this crisis of action. What do I do? Right? I set this intention to do this specific thing, and now it looks like it's all falling apart. Now what do I do? Right? If I hold to my intention, the way will be shown. And I could look at your chart and say, okay, the moon, let's see, today the moon is squaring the sun, and this is just a chart of the moment. It's squaring the sun from the first house to the fourth house. And that might mean that it's going to take place in your individual expression of the foundation. I could look at your chart and go, whoa, you might have built your house on sand, right? The foundation of whatever it was that your intention was with that new moon might have been on sandy ground. So you got to go back and shore up the foundation. So even though there's mystery and magic here, it's really very sort of logical at times as well, to be able to look at that and go, oh, okay, it's the first to the fourth house today squaring, and that's where the sun happens to be. If I looked in your own personal chart, I could tell you where that square is happening and tell you that if you are facing a crisis of action today, that it's likely going to be in this area of your life. And you could look to what's going on underneath the surface as to why or what to do next. Okay. Now, the other thing that makes this incredibly difficult is that our charts are all individually different from one another. So it might be the new moon on the whole, right? The moon is actually in new phase. But for you personally, it may not be your new moon, because the moon likely was not new for you when you were born. Right? It was in some other phase. There's, 360 degrees of the zodiac it could have been in, right? Varying degrees of its state. So your personal new moon can be later than the new moon or earlier than the new moon. So we have these complexities that show up out of the more simple things that we can learn about astrology, the planets, the houses, and the signs. And the aspects and configurations, the shapes of things like the mystic rectangle or the challenge, like just this red line from here to here tells me there's a square between the part of fortune and Uranus. Getting what we want today won't come easy because there's a square going on here, right? It's going to be a challenge. You might have to give a little to get something. You might have to give up something in order to get what you want. And that's just the way of life, right? So those are the relationships, really are the spice, if you will, right? So you and me and all of us women and men out there this morning, we could all make a pot of soup, right? Right now it's getting to be winter here, and chicken noodle soup sounds really good. It's really nourishing, and yeah, I can eat for a couple of days off that. But the way I make my chicken noodle soup and the spices I use is going to be different, because every one of you is probably going to do something different than what I do, right? So the aspects and the configurations, the relationships between the planets and the dynamics are all the spice, right? The spices that we use. The different way the recipe, gets expressed through that particular aspect. So hopefully this is all making sense to everybody. Good morning, Kristen. And I don't see anybody saying, yeah, but I don't get this, but. So this is good. This is a good thing. All right. So I'm going to wait for a couple of seconds and talk to you a little bit about the energies of the day. Wow. I did not realize that much time had gone by. It's 8:45. Okay, I'm going to tell you about the energies of the day, and then we will stop for here. And then I will tomorrow begin a conversation about the basics of human design and the gene keys. It's astrology, just the same, but used, expressed differently, a different system. Okay. So today we have the moon in Capricorn still. We are still accessing practical, organized energy, the down to earth kind of energies that Capricorn gives us or allows space for us to express through, meaning set some goals, get some work done, clear away your desk if it looks like mine's. There's only one corner of my desk right now that really looks a mess. The rest of it looks, pretty decent for me. So today we still have availability of that kind of energy to be able to put down a foundation, to be able to strengthen a foundation, to be able to work through goals and see, maybe there's some changes in the goals that you need to make and that type of thing. The moon this morning is conjunct Pluto. There is a very powerful emotional connection, a darker, deeper energy going through, waving through our collective. Not in a bad way necessarily, but in a way that takes us into depth. The moon and Pluto, when they're in a conjunction, are very emotional and can sometimes can cause us to get into a power struggle between our emotional expression and what's really appropriate for us to express. So, for example, the moon and Pluto may be very angry at something, but being able to express anger appropriately is what is really the problem, right? Is it okay to go and blow up at someone today? No, right? That's never okay. But Pluto moon can totally blur that for us. And we can find ourselves in power struggles with one another, or in power struggles with our ideologies, right? So all we need to know is the moon moves fairly quickly, and this too shall pass, and it will be gone. The moon in square to the sun, though, is with us for most of the day. And part of that is because the moon squaring the sun really takes us into a place where we have to re-identify our goals in a way that makes sense. So our intentions, let's say, which I think are also goals, maybe expressed over a longer period of time. And this gives us the idea that there's something that we haven't seen, something that we need to look at today, maybe. If you set intentions, some people don't do that with the new moon. But if you did that with the new moon, today may be the first day that you experience a challenge with that. And this is your opportunity. The squares, the 90-degree relationships bring us the opportunity to change something, to move through or flow with the energy in a different way. Because, it's like water. When water hits a dam, it does its damnedest to get around the dam. And even, we know that water can eat through rock. Right? The mountains are eroding because of the action of water and wind and the elements, right? So we know water has force and it has the ability to move through something. And really, that is the moon, right? Same thing here, bringing us this energy of things that we can change. And, it is the actual block that causes creativity to be expressed, a creative way to move through something, right? Because we don't like to be stopped completely. There's always a way around. Maybe it's a way over, maybe it's under, right? We don't know until we look at that challenge as something good and not necessarily something stopping us. It's just making us take a look a little bit deeper. The moon today is also in a sextile, again, a relationship, in a 60-degree relationship to Jupiter. And a 60-degree relationship, we know from experience over time, is a good relationship. It is a relationship where the gifts and the talents and the skills that you have through one planet are easily shared with the gifts and the talents of the other one. Right? So the moon and Jupiter working really well today. This gives us an optimism to the day, right? Because Jupiter represents optimism, growth, and expansion. The moon is about timing. In some cases, it's about getting back in alignment with your inner dynamics. And if your inner dynamics matched your skills, then you can actually optimistically see how things can move ahead, how you can move forward. So the day overall is not necessarily a bad one. It is actually, I think, a good day to get some things done. But that doesn't mean you won't meet up with challenges. Some of you will be challenged, right? Some of you are going to be challenged by the things that occur in your world, in your life. And what does that mean? There's got to be a way around it, right? It just means the door closed here, but there's always an opening somewhere else. You just have to find it. You have to have the wherewithal to stick with it and see where this road leads. It's funny because on Sunday, I was at a pumpkin patch, and it was at a farm here in Mount Vernon, not far from me. And there was a store, where you could buy farm, like onions and, just the different, crops that they bring in. And there was also these really fun little like alcove areas. And in the alcove areas, they had little knickknacks and things like that. Well, one of the rooms was a Wizard of Oz room. And so you go into this little tiny room, and there was this princess dress, or the good fairy, the dress that she might have worn. And there's all of this natural stuff in the room. And there was the video of the Wizard of Oz playing. And I just happened to walk in at the part where it was saying, follow the yellow brick road. And I looked out the door, because it led outdoors, and there was this yellow brick road. And I went, well, how fun is that? So, just little bricks painted yellow that you could follow along on a path that, just was kind of whimsical and just fun. But life is like that too, right? It's about following the yellow brick road. And where does it lead? Well, we don't know. Maybe we're going to meet someone along the way, and it takes us on a little side trip through, Munchkin land, or maybe we just keep going and we meet up with someone else or another thing. We don't know. But if we look at these obstacles that show up in our lives as obstacles and things that we have to manage, then it's not much fun. But if we can look at these things like the obstacles or the things that happen to us as, I wonder what this means in the great context of my life, and what door might be opening because this one closed. It's hard to see that in the moment, though. It really is. I know because I've been there recently, and I also know because I have friends there right now, where it's hard to see that the road ahead is magical. There's something going on. You may not know what it is right now, but you got to follow the yellow brick road to see where it leads you. And at every moment, there's a choice point that you come to. And the choice point is, what do I do next? What meaning am I going to assign this? The very first lesson in A Course in Miracles says for us to look around our world and recognize that nothing has meaning. And it wigged me out the very first time I did that, this Course in Miracles thing. It says this pen has no meaning. This mouse has no meaning. This coffee has no meaning. That tree has no meaning, right? This microphone has no meaning. I mean, that's the lesson, right? You go through, because what you're recognizing is that we ascribe a meaning to everything. But is it the true meaning, right? We may ascribe the catastrophe of a hurricane moving through a town as having meaning. It means people lost their lives, they've lost their livings, they lost this, and we attribute loss to that. And, for good reason. It appears to be a destructive event. And, certainly the people who've been affected by it have had their lives turned upside down. But there's a higher meaning here. We just don't know what it is. And if we can only ascribe the meaning of it as an event that caused devastation, then we will always view it as devastation. We won't see that there's possibly something better going on, something that we just didn't see. Like maybe these buildings needed to be built in a better way. I don't know. I want to sit here and tell you not to ascribe any meaning to anything. Be an observer. Be an observer. Because the moment that you come down on the fact that this is a pen, the magic of what this is gone. or the miracle of what this is gone. We now know, right, that it writes. And this one happens to write in the color burgundy, which I love. So we're looking at the fact, and these are simplistic, right? That, this has no meaning, etc. What it leads us to is that nothing that we think of as having meaning has the meaning that we think it has. And that we are attributing the meaning to it. Maybe quite erroneously. We don't know. But that doesn't mean that we don't have compassion, and that, we have brothers and sisters and fellow human beings who are suffering. We recognize that. And we do our level best to be there for them and to help them through. But we don't ascribe this as a defining moment for their lives. It could be, in retrospect, later be the time in their lives where they picked up and they moved to someplace else and their whole world opens up and changes them for the better. We don't know. We don't know if we ascribe only the meaning of devastation and loss to this event. And I know that's thinking way outside the box. But the moon is going to move into Aquarius tomorrow, so we better start thinking outside of the box, right? We can do that later this week. Last thing this morning, the moon is turning void, of course, this afternoon at 2:50 p.m. West Coast time. And that would make it, 5:50 p.m. East Coast time. Your day's most likely done. And it turns back, or the void ends at 12:36 a.m. my time. So what's that, 3:36 a.m. for you all. So we start the day fresh tomorrow with the moon in Aquarius. And that is where we can turn things upside down and see things differently and, engage with it from a different level than the level of Capricorn, which tends to see things in very practical terms. Aquarius sees things through possibilities. I like that. All righty. So that's all I have for you today. Let me take one last look here at comments and questions. Tina, I was told I wasn't a culture fit for yet another job. Third such pronouncement in 5 months. Bruised, tired, and facing another day. What do I think about that, Tina? What I think about that is that you are maybe not meant to be looking for a job. I remember a couple of weeks ago, you weren't probably listening at the time, but I told everybody that I had applied for jobs, that I was going to get a job, that it was going to be just a part-time job. And I was going to do that because I needed, to have more of a steady income coming in to help me support what I was doing. Debbie, I will pull a card. Good idea. In the moment, though, I applied for 3 different jobs. One I knew I was a shoo-in for. Really, I just knew. Even though it wasn't going to be anytime real soon, it was going to be more like late November. I was a shoo-in for that job, right? But guess what? The universe laughed at me. I didn't get any one of those. I didn't get any one of them. And I had to sit back and went, well, WTF, right? I mean, literally, I'm like, what do you mean I can't have that job? I was really kind of amused, I would say, after my initial response was, what, I'm not good enough. But my next response was amusement, because I knew I'm not meant to work a job out there. My job is right here at my house doing what I'm doing. But I had this limitation in my thinking about what it is that I needed for an income, and that I needed to go out and find a job and do that. And the universe laughed, right? The universe laughs. So you may be having the same kind of an experience where you're trying to push yourself into some place that you don't belong. The universe is shutting off the flow there so that you will look to a different direction, right? A different direction for that. And anyway, any other comments here? Debbie, yes, I'll pull a card. Definition of insanity. Yes, the definition of insanity. Doing the same thing but expecting a different outcome. Definitely insanity. Okay, so I'm going to disappear for 1 second while I grab the cards and we'll pull a card. How about that? And good God, I have so many different decks of cards here. I mean, I could as easily pull an angel card, but we seem to have such good luck with this deck. This is The Wisdom of the Oracle by Colette Baron Reed. Love this deck. And the funny thing is, my other favorite deck was called Wisdom of Avalon, and it was also by Colette Baron Reed. So maybe one day I'll pull two cards. We'll pull one from here and her other deck and see how they play. So somebody give me the wording for a question for today. Debbie, since you said card question mark, what would you like me to pull a card in about? So I'm going to give her a minute while I just tune in here. Well, never mind Debbie, because this one just popped out. The card is Mending. Mending, Mending. Card number 52. And it actually fell out of the deck upside down. So we'll be looking at the protection message as well as the actual meaning of the card. I do believe this is the last one in the deck. It is. Okay, maybe I'll pull another. Debbie, when we're done, I'll call you and pull a card. So Mending, the essential meaning of the card Mending, if you look at that, is forgiveness, making amends, healing after arguments. And the Oracle's message says, each time we are hurt and allow the hurt to pass through us without understanding and integration, we accumulate an unwanted burden. This keeps us chained to the very things we need to heal: the pain, the memories, the echoes of resentments, and the arguments that we rehearse over and over. Now is the time for mending rifts, healing wounds, and letting go of the old hurts in order to reclaim your power. Now is the time to forgive, to release, to make peace, and to make amends to others. Set yourself free. Because it was upside down, I'm also going to read the protection message, which says, heartbreak is a strange healer of souls. Our grief strips away our masks and loosens our tight hold on our separateness, where we view ourselves as I and the world as it. Loss allows us to see ourselves as part of a larger scheme, opening us up to sympathy, empathy, and dependence on others in the moment when we can't hold ourselves together. And it leads us to become one with the greater whole again. Pain and suffering is part of life, and none of us will be immune to it. Can you view this loss, this pain, this dissonance as a way back to source? Let your sorrow break your heart wide open. You will never be left behind. You are loved now more than ever by Spirit, who does not want you to feel alone. One day you will look back and know this truth. Wow, that's a pretty powerful card. And, that card to me speaks from Chiron. It speaks to me of Chiron. Chiron as a planet is the archetype of the wounded healer. So in the energy of Chiron, what we see is the wound, the hurt, the gaping gash, right? The hurt that we feel because of this wound. And the wound goes deep. It's never just superficial. It's never just this little, paper cut that I got. It's never just that. It goes deeper, the wounds for Chiron. And Debbie, what's interesting about that is, for some reason this morning, just because I know, what's been going on for you, I happened to pull your longer term transits up. And one of the longest term transits that you're experiencing, which began in May of 2017 and doesn't end until February 2019, is a Chiron sextile Chiron. That means there's a lot of wounding going on. And there has been, if I look at your life over those last several months, last couple of years, lots of wounding going on. And wounding not as a punishment and not as a way to make you hurt, but as a way for you to open up more and more and more, and to, healing. And sometimes that energy of the healing has to come from within you, where you could really get into your inner self. And what do these losses all have in common? Where are they leaving you? No, I don't think more's coming. February 2019 is less than 5 months away, right? Less than 5 months away. I think all of the wounding has been done, but what does it mean? That's where you are now. What does that mean for me? The sextile says there is, this ease and flow of this energy that's going back and forth between the planet and where it was at your birth and where it is now. And it is about becoming more empowered, because I happen to know your Chiron was in Aquarius at birth. And now that it's back in Pisces, it's about, where am I being the victim? Where can I let go of being the victim and see this in a different way? Where's my freedom in this? And where does that freedom take me? I don't know where it takes you, because it's a journey, right? You don't know necessarily where it takes you either yet. But I know you want it over. I know. I feel for you so bad. I just, everybody send a cosmic hug over to Debbie. And she needs one very bad. She needs to know that she's loved, and that we all have a fragment of what it is you're experiencing that we are carrying within us, and that we are also hurting for you. Maybe not in the same way that you are hurting, but we all understand completely, right? Interesting that, Chiron, where is Chiron today? 29 degrees of Pisces. So it's back into that Pisces territory for sure. But the brief glimpse that we got of Chiron in Aries was about knowing when we need others and knowing when we don't, knowing when it's time to be independent versus when is it time to be dependent. So maybe there's something juicy there for you to learn about. And now it's back into the territory of the victim energy. And how can we surrender all of this? The whole mantra for Chiron and Pisces was let go and let God. And he doesn't seem to want you there in Florida, perhaps. Maybe that's the message. Get out of Florida. We don't know. And right now you need everyone. Absolutely. And that's part of the lesson too, right? Because sometimes we just carry around this, armor, and we feel like we don't need anybody, that we don't want anybody. We're not going to let anybody help us because I'm an independent person. But there's fallacy in that. The fallacy is that we are all together on this boat ship called Earth, and that we are by nature tribal, community oriented. What happens to one happens to us all. And Debbie, good luck selling a house now. Say, F the house. Who cares? Leave it there. Let the chips fall where they may. Be open to what comes next. I know that sounds easy for me to say sitting here in Washington, where I haven't, there's never been a hurricane run through my yard. And yet that doesn't mean that I don't experience this. There's a message here for all of us in letting go, in seeing from a higher perspective, right? What's going on, right? What was that you sent me, Debbie? I request the most benevolent outcome for me to have today. Serendipitous synchronicities and amazing magical surprises. And may this be better than I hope for or can even imagine. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You gave that to me when I was in the lowest of lows just a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. We wish the same for you, right? That you could have serendipitous synchronicities and amazing magical surprises, that out of this seeming devastation, that the phoenix is arising, and that phoenix has something miraculous for you, miraculous for everyone. All right. Okay. Thank you all so much. I wish you all a wonderful day. And if you have any questions, you can type them in there and I will see them, or you can email them to livingastrology111@gmail.com. All right, everybody. Much love to you all. Mwah! Have a great day. See you here tomorrow morning. Bye.